It's time for Wise Money with Korhorn Financial Group with financial advisors Kevin Korhorn, Mike Bernard, and Josh Gregory.
Welcome to another episode of Wise Money with Korhorn Financial Group, where every week we're helping you take your next wise step in your financial life. Coming to you from the KFG studios, my name is Mike Bernard. I am your host. I'm also one of the certified financial planners. Thanks for being with us. Next to me, certified financial planner and my business partner, Josh Gregory.
Hey, have you ever dreamed of starting a business? It's a pretty popular idea in this country. 23 million people have hung a shingle and started their own sole proprietorship.
Wow.
That's amazing. But as enticing as it might be to work for yourself, the question is, does it expose you to certain tax consequences or certain legal risks? We're going to be talking through that today as we continue on with our legal issues that could be affecting your financial life. That's our topic from last week as well. We're excited to welcome back to the Wise Money Show attorney Jamey Haigh to share his insights on how to structure a business wisely.
You had me all excited about starting your own business, all that, and then you just made it really boring talking about taxes and legal issues.
I know.
But
sorry.
We'll make it lively for you today. If you have a question, you probably will. This stuff is confusing, but Jamie's going to break it down for us. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us. Give us a call. Send us a text, 574-222-2000. Call or text 574-222-2000. Online, wisemoney.com. You can submit a question right there on the right as well, up on previous episodes. And speaking of previous episodes, all the shows recorded, they're on the YouTube channel. Just look us up, Wise Money Radio. You can subscribe to it, like it if you like it, all that sort of stuff. Facebook and Twitter as well. All right, Josh mentioned, Jamey, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
It's
nice
been
to be with you.
It's been too long. You've been on the show before, actually talking about a very similar topic. You'll be on back next week, actually talking about succession planning, which I actually think will be even more lively. But for the fans who don't remember you, why don't you introduce yourself again? Tell us all a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Good to be back. The last show must not have gotten a lot of listens because it's been a while.
But, you know the strategy.
Jamey Haigh, good to be with you. So married, 7 kids, been a lawyer for 19 years, went to Notre Dame undergrad law school, practiced corporate law with Llc Can, and we're a law firm that about 18 lawyers do corporate law, employment law, litigation, estate planning.
Yep. All sorts of stuff. Yep. Last week, Mark Cronetti was on, who does a variety of things, but he was talking about estate planning. He does the estate planning there. And Jamey, so you specialize in mostly business transactions, business work. Is that really your specialty?
Exactly. Business transactions, corporate. So people buying and selling businesses, starting businesses, buying and selling widgets, services, distribution agreements, all those sorts of things.
Yep. And one of the things we love, so all of the sponsors on the Wise Money Show are people that we've worked with for a long time. And so Jamey, we've worked with Jamey for several years now in Llc Can. And one of the things I appreciate actually about all the folks at the firm, attorneys with personality. And actually an enjoyable personality. Let's just say that. Hopefully that comes through on the radio today. So
I like hanging out with you, Jamey.
Wow. I'm blushing.
All right. There you go. Hey, so I know that we have many listeners who own their own small business. You might own your own small business. If you don't, likely you work for a small business or you know someone who does. Small businesses are really the lifeblood of the economy, especially the local economy here. And so how should you legally structure that small business? Or like Josh said in the intro, if you're thinking about hanging a shingle, get started, how should you structure your business from the get-go? We're going to talk about, and we're going to try to make it lively, but talk about the different choices that you have and really some pros and cons. And then I'm going to put Jamey on the hot seat and say, all right, if it's this, what should you do? If it's this, what should you do? So let's start with the most basic. You decide to go out and start your own business, hang a shingle, they say, and start your own sole proprietorship. What in the world is that?
Well, I'll try to keep it general, and because with anything legal, it's hard to ever get a absolute from a lawyer, and there's good reason for that. But sole proprietorship is just a single person, a single individual engaged in business for profit, and no filing with the state in terms of a legal entity or anything. It's just somebody who goes out there and engages in some business for profit. So it could be providing services, some product, whatever it might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm latching on to this phrase "for profit" because I've run into a rash of folks here lately who are trying to write off certain expenses for their little hobby farm, or maybe they have an antique booth or something, but it's really not profitable. It never has been, probably never will be. Are those people still considered sole proprietors, or are they maybe drifting into an area that really isn't even a legal entity? They're not really in business because of that profit motive that you mentioned.
Right. So for all the discussion, really, analytically, you got to separate what is the legal structure for purposes of the state and state law, as opposed to what is the tax treatment for federal income tax law,
which we're going to talk about a little bit of both of those. Yeah.
Right. So as we go through all those things, for purposes of what's your liability in the business? If you're not operating through a legal entity that's filed with the state, the basic thing is, you're a sole proprietor. You are unlimitedly liable for any liabilities of that business. So if you're doing something that's a hobby, but someone's injured and they come after you, they have recourse to your house, to your car, all those things. Yeah. So you're a sole proprietor, right? For tax purposes, the IRS has a page that says, "Hey, are you is it a hobby,
right,
or is it a sole proprietorship?" So, visit that page, do that analysis. But for purposes of liability, you're out there doing something and you're liable individually, personally, for whatever might happen.
Is that the number one, drawback or disadvantage of the sole proprietor? Is it this risk that you're exposed to?
Exactly. So if you haven't, registered an entity with the state, then you don't have the benefit of the limited liability. That if you're operating the business through an entity, your liability for any business liabilities is limited to the assets in that company or corporation.
So in other words, if somebody's suing you, they can come get whatever they need to. Is your only recourse at that point just bankruptcy to try to protect yourself if they were coming after you for everything?
That would be it. I mean, you would obviously check with your insurance carrier and see what coverage you might have, and that's going to be obviously another piece of I think what you all advise about and what we'll mention here too is yes, you have liability. Insurance will cover that, and you ought to have insurance whether you have a legal entity or not.
So sole proprietor, you're just hanging a shingle. And the biggest drawback, the biggest con is if that shingle falls and crashes, then there's no protection there. You might have insurance, but all of your personal assets. The second drawback, and this is actually not that much different than how you might structure your LLC if you do that. But Josh, can you explain the tax consequences real quick of the profits on your sole proprietorship?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to a dirty word to a lot of business owners, and that's self-employment income.
Yep.
So those of you that maybe have ever been deemed a subcontractor or a self-employed individual, you know that all the income that you're generating, you get to offset that with business expenses to the best of your ability, but whatever's left over, the profit, so to speak, gets hit not only with federal income taxes and state and local income taxes, but another one, it's self-employment tax. This is how on those profits you're paying into the Social Security Administration and the Medicare system.
Yeah, it's FICA, right? And if you're just an employee, then they're withholding FICA, and what you probably don't know is your company's paying FICA on your behalf too. So there's two sets of FICA. When you are a sole proprietor or being taxed as one, which we'll get to in a minute, then you're paying that self-employment tax, that combined 15.3% up to a pretty sizable number. And you're not withholding against it, so it catches a lot of people by surprise. Jamey, really quick, for someone who just wants to start this way, and we're going to tell you some reasons why you might not want to. Can you have employees if you're a sole proprietor? I mean, can you have employees?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. Yep. We all go to the IRS website and say, hey, I'm starting a business. I'm having employees, and or talk to your trusted tax advisor.
Right.
Obviously, you don't want to screw that up. You have employment taxes, and people can really get in bad situation with that.
Yeah. We're going to talk about some other options because while a sole proprietorship is easy, you can get started right away. And one of the things I love about America is it really still is the land of the free. You can go out and do whatever you want. And so you can start that business. Sole proprietor is an easy way to get started, but it might not be the best way, even if you're trying to keep things simple. We're going to talk about the LLC, partnerships, and a few others coming up on Wise Money with Corhorn Financial Group.
Good segment.
Thank you. All right. So the Casey's endorsement. Now I'm blushing. So
That wasn't that good.
oh. Sorry.
It's not good. It made you blush. Like, what?
Actually, Casey's so
a step
negative.
above set, right?
So negative that even that was a compliment. Okay, so partnership is you know, and you sent me some notes on this. I know we're just drawing it out for the
Is that
listeners.
like praising with ain't damnation?
Yeah,
I think that's what that is.
that's right.
I prefer backhanded compliment.
Okay, so let's just spend a tiny amount of time on partnership because I think there's just there could be some confusion there, and then that will just lead right into LLC, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
A tiny amount on, so for the business entity partnership, it's sort of crazy to not,
Who would ever do
order,
that,
yeah.
right?
But
that's why I was just going to say.
I wondered if you had any stories of people who were deemed to be in partnership and they didn't even really know it, or can that happen?
Yeah, that absolutely can happen. I can't think of something, where that's actually happened. But
So maybe you can just take that, and as if we talk about a partnership, you can lead that and say, if you're starting a partnership, you're going to start an LLC. If you're trying to start a partnership, you're going to.
I think it's absolutely good to talk about for analytical purposes for sure, but also people don't necessarily understand that if they're out there engaged in some activity with somebody else for profit, that if they do something bad, the other person does something bad, unlimitedly liable yourself.
So even if it's informal, it hasn't been, some legal entity created.
Right.
You're working together in some sort of joint venture.
Yeah, 3 people are cutting trees down for they kind of go out on the weekends and they cut a tree down, and one of the 3 runs over somebody. Well, they're all unlimited liable for that.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Oh. You're a ray of sunshine, Jamie. It's fun to think about.
Never helping you with your landscaping again, Mike.
You guys are glad you have a LLC with Kevin, right?
That's right. Oh yes.
Yes. We have three layers.
Yes.
Probably cutting trees down right now. And running people over.
That's funny.
All right. Okay. So we'll just see where we go. I'll lob partnership out there, and then you can talk as much about it, and then you can take it to LLC, or you can pause, and I'll make the transitions up to you. We'll just see how it goes.
Okay.
All right. Ready? All right. What is the only ship that doesn't float? It's a partnership, right? I think that's how that joke goes. This is Wise Money with Corhorn Financial Group. My name's Mike Bernard. With me in the KFG studios, Josh Gregory, and special guest attorney with Llc Kern & Keene, Jamey Haigh. Special thanks to the attorneys at Llc Kern & Keene for sponsoring the Wise Money Show, along with First State Bank. They will be a guest on soon talking about financing for your business and different loans and so on that will be important for your personal finances. So we're looking forward to that. If you have any questions, let me just remind you, online, wisemoneyradio.com, social media at Wise Money Radio, Facebook and YouTube. You can also call or text 574-222-2000. 574-222-2000. With Jamey today, we're talking about the different ways you can structure your small business. And even if you're just trying to engage in some sort of side project for profit, Jamey just told us you're in business, and that would be deemed a sole proprietorship, which has tons of risks. It's very easy to get started, but lots of risk. Before we get on to the more exciting ones, let's talk about a partnership then. I mean, it's not just a bad joke. Oftentimes, that's just a bad idea. But Jamey, share a little bit about having a partnership.
Sure. So in the last segment, we talked about, one person engaged in activity for profit, sole proprietorship. something bad happens, personal assets are subject to being recovered by the person harmed. If you have two or more folks who are engaged in a business activity to generate profits, it's a partnership, a general partnership for which each of the partners is unlimitedly liable for any liabilities of the business. So if there's 3 people who are engaged in a business activity and one of them does something bad, hurts somebody in the course of that activity, then the personal assets of all 3 are equally at risk to make things right with the person injured.
I think you would just assume, well, no, that was their, they made a mistake. This person made a mistake. But yeah, if you're engaged with them in some activity to make a profit, even if you haven't filed something with the state and so on, but if you're doing something together with them, then you're liable as well.
Well, it's not like those partnerships are just operating with absolutely no protection. I mean, you would expect that they would have some sort of insurance protection in place as a first line of defense for that partnership if it was formally created and it's an actual business that they're operating. But what if one of your partners is operating outside of the activities that are covered by that policy? Sometimes insurance companies, they're good at carving out certain things that they don't want to cover, so you need to steer clear of it. Well, what if you don't?
Yeah.
The thought of being liable for something that your business partner did, that's enough to scare most people away as soon as they hear this, right? That's worse than, co-signing for your kid's student loan or something.
Yeah. The liability is sort of the big issue, and there's other problems like, hey, if there's 3 of us, who has the authority to engage in this activity, make this decision, do this? All those things are sort of something separate, but all part of the calculation. It's a bad idea to really have a partnership. If you're going to have one, have something in writing that sort of governs or controls the agreement among the parties of how this is going to work, even if it's relatively informal.
Yeah.
But really a bad idea.
So let's transition to then the good idea. And we are not discouraging you from starting your business. Get out there and start that business. Where do you start? It starts with a great idea. Some problem that you see consumers have, people have, that you have a solution for. Start that business. As you start it, as you craft out that plan, you then need to quickly think about how should we structure this thing legally. That's why we're devoting this show to it. And a lot of you will first either question or think of something called an LLC. So Jamey, share that. Actually, before you do, LLCs can be taxed in 2 different ways. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But what is the LLC?
Sure. Yeah. Limited liability company. So look, we have sole proprietorship, general partnership, no filing with the state. It's just implied by the law. But if you want to have the asset protection where any liabilities of the business, the recourse is only to the assets of the business, you form a limited liability company with the state or a corporation with the state. We'll talk about that. Limited liability companies, filing with the state, it's cheap, it's inexpensive online, $100.
Do you need an attorney to do that, or can you just get on there and do it yourself?
You can do it yourself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why you might not want to, but it shouldn't be an impediment to getting it done. So you file with the state, and then if you have assets of the business already, you're going to want to have some written document that you're assigning that asset into the business. And if you have a vehicle that's owned individually, you're going to transfer the title over. There's things like that. You want to get the assets into the business. But a limited liability company actually can be taxed 4 ways.
4 ways.
Very, very odd. So it's
You're going to get an education today, Mike.
It is a chameleon for tax purposes. But the default rules are that it's taxed as a sole proprietorship if there's one owner.
Yeah.
And it's taxed as a general partnership if there's more than one owner. That's the default rule.
Yep.
But we'll get to this. But an LLC, you can also make an S election.
Yep.
You can also be it's a C Corp, which is what we think of the large corporations where there's multiple levels of taxation.
So I've never heard that one before.
Answer.
Yeah. Now
My goodness.
You can do whatever you want. That's what I just heard.
Okay, I didn't know that an LLC could be
It's
taxed
very rare.
like a C Corp. Although we're going to talk about that with
Yeah.
these new. With the new tax laws coming down the pike with C Corp. So that's very interesting. So the default, again, is that it will be taxed as a sole proprietorship partnership. So you're not saving on that FICA, that self-employment tax.
Yeah, any way you're going to do this, if you're in business for yourself, and the IRS is going to get its money on the employment taxes, right? Unless you have someone else there to pay it, and the only one who's going to be there to pay it is an employer, you're going to be on the hook for it. But with a limited liability company, they're very easy to set up. That's a great thing. They're very flexible, which is also a great thing. But if you're doing it with other people, there's less of a default structure in terms of, like with a corporation, there's a board of directors, there's officers, everybody's familiar with that. With an LLC, it's very flexible, and you can decide what to do. So with that freedom comes a little more responsibility to make decisions. But the quick and easy thing on this, if you take away nothing else, go to the state, $100, file, do business as an LLC. That's almost always going to be the easiest, kind of way to proceed and get the liability coverage that you want.
Anytime that we're talking to business owners or landlords is another application here. I present an LLC as a risk management tool. I don't think of it as really a tax planning vehicle because for the most part, it's not like it introduces any new tax sheltering opportunities or anything like that for the most part. But talk about, am I correct in saying that this is really a way to kind of put a fence around the business activity? So if there's some sort of explosion within the business there, it doesn't radiate out into your personal life where you could lose personal assets, especially if it was a business partner who may be screwed up, right?
Why are you looking at me when you say that?
Well, you're the only one in the room, sorry.
Right.
That's exactly right. So, and look, if you're going to do it, an LLC, there's, talk to your insurance carrier, right? So insurance, they're underwriting individuals. They're not contemplating business activities, business risks, and so there's going to be exclusions on those policies. So, talk to your insurance carrier. Here's what I'm doing. Make sure you have coverage because, you do want to protect what's in the business anyway. But if you imagine a service providing business, maybe not a lot of assets, you're doing business through that LLC. If something goes haywire, and the business assets, there aren't many, it's sort of, hey, all right, the business didn't work, but you've kept all your personal assets.
Yeah, right. Really quick, the agreement that you're talking about. So you can go online, file $100, but you should probably have some sort of stated agreement in how things are going to work. What's that quickly called?
Yeah, exactly. So articles of organization is what you file with the state of Indiana to form the LLC, and then an LLC should also have an operating agreement. That's a written agreement, among the members, how it's going to operate. And there's if you just kind of doing something quick and easy, you just want to get going, there's online, forums and templates and things where you can kind of see what's there. But basically, for it's sort of the equivalent of a corporation's bylaws.
Yeah. We're going to pick that back up as well as talk about then how your LLC could be taxed as a corporation, and then what type of corporation. We're going to talk about that S Corp. That and more coming up here on Wise Money with Korhorn Financial Group. Cool. So, a little bonus content on YouTube, and I think I emailed you about this a while back. Randy Kozel and I are involved in a little startup venture with some friends of mine back in Grand Rapids, and it's an online business where you round up all of your purchases to the next dollar, and our app, our business allows you to send that change to a charity of your choice. And when we had the idea, the idea wasn't out there. No one else was doing it. And turns out, starting a business is pretty hard. Second, starting a technology business is almost impossible. Almost impossible. So here we are 2+ years later, and we're still working on it. And supposed to go live months ago, and anyway, still in beta, working on things. But this is new territory. Now I think there's 2 other businesses out there that have beat us to market. But finding insurance And no insurance company is going to write this thing because you're dealing with technology, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with bank accounts. Even though we're not keeping any of that information, the premium is just outrageous. And so we're starting this high-risk business, but the very first step was wrap it in an LLC because there's no assets in the business.
Right.
But I don't want to. There's no way we can spend $20,000 to buy insurance our very first year when we have 0 customers to get started. Mm-hmm. So just bonus content to you on YouTube, and Jamey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean the first line of defense before, yes, you need to talk about insurance and for this business, that's very important. But the start is to put some walls around the business so that something explodes, like Josh said, where personal assets are protected.
That's exactly right. And look, an LLC, if it owns real estate, there's assets there that need to be protected, and that entity has to have the insurance coverage to cover. Totally. Obviously. Right. And there's others. It's an independent contractor who's providing services as a consultant. There's no assets.
Right.
You don't really need to worry about insurance.
About insurance, right? Exactly.
So it's always analysis of what do I have to protect, and the cost benefit of that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
As a consultant, I couldn't step on foot the local gas company. Now it's a national company, but family-owned gas company wouldn't let me on premise unless I had a $1 million umbrella policy.
Yep.
Which I got because I didn't know how cheap they were back then. This is like 05. But
yeah. No, I mean that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
really well, but your business is fairly high risk.
Almost nobody would cover it. It took me forever to find an insurance company that would actually cover it, and there's a terrorist coverage policy in there.
Wow,
required to have it.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, but your business is kind of sharp, so you probably yeah, that's probably a good idea.
It's a great point, though. Insurance. It's if you're doing business with an LLC, you need, and if they might be causing damage to you or some liability risk, and you see there's no assets behind that,
but still,
your recourse, you have to make sure they have insurance.
Yeah,
so
totally
that's
right.
part of that. That's the flip side. You're engaged in business with a limited liability company. You need to make sure they have insurance in place that covers you if they do something wrong, because otherwise there's no recourse. So.
Yep. All right. Let's get rolling. Segment 3. If you're starting a rental business, what type of legal entity should you set up? If you are just starting a new joint venture with some friends, what type of business entity structure should you have? I'm going to put Jamey here on the hot seat and pepper him with a few options and see what he tells us. This is Wise Money with Corhorn Financial Group. My name is Mike Bernard. With me in the KFG studios, Josh Gregory, and attorney with Ladue, Kern & Keene, Jamey Haigh. Thanks for being with us today. Want to also say thanks to Bethel College Adult and Graduate Studies, as well as Diane Bennett with RE/MAX 100 for partnering with us on the Wise Money Show. We are talking about when you're starting a small business, or if you have a small business, or if you work at a small business, how should that small business be structured from a legal standpoint? All part of a series about how legal issues intersect with your personal finances. Jamey's going to be with us next week talking about succession planning. And then after that, we're going to have an individual from First State Bank talking about different credit options and so on. So we left off talking about the LLC. And Jamey told us there's 4 ways for that LLC to be taxed, and it was a little creative math there, but one of them is you can have your LLC choose to be taxed as an S Corp or a corporation. Let's talk about that S Corp in light of, and we'll get to the taxes on that as well. So what's an S Corp, Jamey?
Yeah, so an S Corp is simply an election with the IRS, so it's a federal tax status, and it just requires you have to qualify. There are certain requirements that have to be met in order to be eligible to be taxed as an S corporation. But it ensures the one level of taxation like a partnership, as opposed to what we think of as a C corporation. We think of large corporations, of Microsoft or Google. There's income tax at the entity level, and then there's tax, obviously, at the shareholder level.
And that's a big deal, isn't it? Yeah, you know, when Microsoft has their big year and they pay a boatload of taxes, and then they distribute those profits out to the business owners, the stockholders pay tax a second time, don't they? Double taxation. But you're saying the S Corp avoids some of that.
Yeah, it has single level taxation. So basically, all of the business's profits are simply taxed to the individual on a pro rata basis, on basis of ownership, and that's the same with the partnership. But the S corporation election with the IRS has some little different tax. The single level taxation is the same as with a partnership taxation, but then there's some other attributes of the S Corp as opposed to a partnership that might make it more advantageous. That's really getting into.
Do you want to get in? Do you want to? Okay, well, first
I consider it really dry, but
before I want you to go there, but before we do, the S Corp, so we're no longer talking LLC, we're talking S Corp, but the S Corp does provide limited liability, right? I mean, it still has that barrier, that fence around it.
Right. So think about for state. For a legal entity, you're going to have either it's going to be an LLC that you file with the state or a corporation that you file with the state. Okay, and there's no filing with the state regarding S corporation, right? So you have an LLC or you have a corporation, and with either of those, if you qualify, you can make an S election with the IRS. So your LLC can be taxed as an S corp, and your corporation can be taxed as an S corp. And you just have to make sure you qualify. And in the operating agreement for the LLC that we talked about, you got to have provisions that relate to an S corp because you don't want to do something that will screw it up and blow that election.
Yeah, right.
So I was having a lot of these types of conversations with folks at the beginning of tax season this year. Business owners that had an LLC. The downside to the LLC from a tax standpoint is that they were paying a whole bunch of those self-employment taxes that we were talking about in an earlier segment. And one of the ways that we were able to minimize that is by turning them into an S Corp for tax purposes. But you have to make that election by March 15th each year, right? You only have a limited window of time to make the decision. Those who didn't make the decision, they've got until the window opens for them again January 1st. So we've got all year to be thinking about it again. Yeah. But this is an important decision that you need to make with your CPA or your financial advisor.
Unless you're starting the business that way. Is that right, Jamey? You can speak to that.
Right. So if you start, you want to talk to your tax advisor when you're starting the business and make that S election right away. So with the S election, the main advantage is that your tax essentially as a corporation with the flow-through tax, but you're paying employment taxes on a reasonable salary for your services, and you're paying employment taxes on that, as opposed to with a partnership, you're paying the employment taxes on all of your income.
Right.
So if you're going to make a high income, S Corp is often advantageous because you're only paying the employment taxes on a portion of that, which is deemed a reasonable salary.
I'm just going to tell you right now, if that sounds appealing, and you're wondering which way you should go, this is exactly where you need to invite your certified financial planner and your business attorney into the room, into that discussion. Because figuring this out, there's just tons of question there. It costs a little bit more to file that S election, and taxes that you need to send in, and some of the unemployment and other things that you're now responsible for. And so you want to make sure that your profit's going to be a certain level. But then I see a lot of people that are just drawn to that, I can avoid some of this self-employment tax, I'll switch over there, and don't realize this fair and reasonable salary requirement now. And then other people, not to just overwhelm you, but then other people switch over and say, okay, I'll do fair and reasonable salary. I'll pay myself this high amount, and then the business loses money every year. And it's, hey, you just offered to pay more taxes than you really should have. So this is exactly where you need great financial advice. And depending on the circumstances, though, there could be thousands of dollars worth of tax savings here. Those were the examples that I saw earlier this spring. And you're right. I'd like to actually hear Jamey talk about some of those extra formalities that come with an S Corp election, some of the filings and just the record keeping that you need to do, that sort of thing. But if you're saving thousands of dollars in payroll taxes,
you've got a big checkbook to write some small little fees
Yep.
or delegate some work to your accountant to still justify this move.
Yep, that's right. And so again, think about sort of the bright line for me is are you going to make a high salary? Are you going to, is your compensation going to be pretty high? So, for example, physicians, we have physicians who they're basically an independent contractor. And so how are they setting up their business? They could just do it as a sole proprietorship, and they have malpractice coverage that's going to cover the insurance, and they're going to have that anyway.
But they don't have any assets in there, so yeah,
right,
sure, yeah.
Right. But if you do a single member LLC with an S election, then you get the benefits of the asset liability protection, but then you get the benefits of an S corporation where you're saving on self-employment taxes, where your reasonable salary is less than your aggregate income. So you're saving that delta on your self-employment taxes.
And then we jump in and say, well, then you can create this type of retirement plan for your single member LLC, and you can save a whole bunch of money on taxes that way and start setting money aside for retirement. So there's a lot of creative things that you can do there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And to your point about sitting down with your financial planner and your attorney, I would just say, as an attorney, it's more important actually to be sitting down with your financial planner and your tax advisor. So don't let the expense and sort of discomfort with attorneys be an impediment to getting this done.
Oh, that's kind. We actually didn't even ask him to say that. Could you just speak for just a moment? Those C Corps, we've kind of already talked about it, but C Corps are really for those really big entities because of that double taxation. Now they've got really favorable tax brackets now. So just a word on C Corps.
Sure. So C Corp, right, because this double level of taxation, the thought was really always, hey, if you can avoid the C Corp status, if you can make an S Corp, or if you can qualify for an S election, then do the S election.
Yeah.
And basically, I mean, without going through all the requirements, basically, to be an S Corp, you can only have not more than 100 shareholders. You can't have any non-U.S. citizen owners.
Yeah.
You can't have any owners who are corporations or certain other entities. And so, basically, small businesses, small domestic businesses would qualified. But with a C Corp, you have those two levels of taxation, but the corporate levels with the tax changes, those tax rates have come down, and there are certain other advantages which now make it more appealing as a structure.
So if your small business is growing up in adolescence with these tax law changes, you need to talk to your tax advisor, your certified financial planner, and get your attorney involved and see if a C Corp makes sense. But still, if you're a small business, an S is likely the place to start. I'm going to put Jamey on the hot seat and ask him if you have a landscaping business, if you start a rental property business, and so on and so forth. We've got that and more coming up here on Wise Money with Corhorn Financial Group. There were between S Corps going to C Corps. Did that actually happen? Or is it still sort of choice? A lot back and forth, but it's still.
I looked into that, really closely, but generally it's, I'm not sure. I think that analysis of, through that analysis, and really, the tax specialists who are really looking at that, generally the analysis, the outcome has seemed to be no.
Right.
We're still not going to do it.
Yeah.
But again, we can get into it a little bit with one of the questions. But look, if you want to retain earnings in the business, and if you're going to be a startup with a lot of losses, you want to carry forward C Corps, or if you're going to take investment from institutions, so
exactly, which is where you're going with that last.
Then C Corp can be good. So the thing about the pass-through taxation is you're getting taxed on, there's a lot of money going out the door in taxes. If you keep it at the C level, you're paying a lower level there, but you're retaining those earnings, and then you're able to use those earnings to grow. So capital-intensive business may well be advantageous, or a lot of losses in the early years. Yeah. So it can be small businesses, but where there's going to be a lot of expenditures, and so service businesses, no.
Right.
Businesses aren't going to scale, no.
What is the limitation on retained earnings for an S Corp? Do you know? Can't go too high on those?
Well, basically, the owners are going to be taxed pro rata on income in that year.
Right.
But I mean, I'm aware of S Corps
They
that
can
have.
sky's the limit on what
Yeah, they
you
got-
leave in the business.
Yeah, they got $10 million in the bank.
Right.
In fact, it can be a source of shareholder consternation. They see that bucket of money they've already paid taxes on, and
Yeah. Loosen up the purse strings, right? Let's
Yeah.
Start paying some of that out.
The whole point of limited liability is that there's not excess assets in the business, right? I mean, why do we want a bunch of cash sitting there?
Right.
How about distribute it out?
Right.
So, that rainy
That's a good point.
day fund, though, business owners, sometimes the controllers, the controlling interests want to keep it handy for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's. I'm gonna pepper through those couple, and then let's get to at least one or two of these questions, Rick or James. And when I intro, I'm gonna ask people. I'm gonna ask you, Jamey, how can people find you? Because I've found when we have guests, if I try to leave that at the end, you can see we're racing to the end. So I just won't ask you. But I'm gonna start the segment saying, "Hey, Jamey Haig's on the program. Jamey, for people that have questions, how can they find you?" So just be aware.
You should ask them about knife and holster businesses too.
Okay, I'll all right. Let's see.
Specifically manufacturing.
Stick with the holster.
Okay.
Woody just has an Instagram.
All right.
Woody.
Yeah, wait. Yeah.
He just has a holster.
Hey, so we've
for a
gone
segment.
a few seconds over on 2. Does that matter? No.
He'll make it sound like chipmunks and squeeze it in there. Make the show better.
Yeah.
All right. Ready? Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is Wise Money with Corhorn Financial Group. Coming to you from the KFG studios. My name's Mike Bernard. With me, Josh Gregory, and special guest, attorney with LaDue, Kern & Keene, Jamey Haigh. If you have any questions, reach out to us, 574-222-2000. 574-222-2000. You can find us online, wisemoneyradio.com. Jamey, for folks that have questions for you, how do they find you? How do they get a hold of you?
Probably easiest is the website, lck-law.com. Email addresses are there, phone numbers are there, and our talented colleagues are there that you can, you can choose from.
All right, I'm going to put Jamey on the hot seat here and just get real practical, because if I'm being honest, the first portion of the show has been pretty boring.
Ouch.
All right, so if you're starting, what's hot this time of year? No pun intended. Landscaping, right? I just did Weekend Warrior project, and it's awful. So you decide on the weekends, on the side, start a landscaping business, buy a couple mowers, put some flyers up around the neighborhood, and you start doing some landscaping. Jamey, how should that person be structured?
Well, that's, low risk of liability. If you're just kind of doing it occasionally, maybe don't worry about anything. But
So sole proprietor.
so it's going to be right. It's
That's
going to be a
the
sole
default,
proprietorship.
right?
Yeah. So if you you run over a child's foot with your mower, the child might own your house.
Right.
So there's things to be thinking about that, right? What's liability? But if there's any concern, just go online. File articles of organization, form an LLC under Indiana state law. It's $100, and if you have some equipment that you sort of assign over to the business, and you're still going to be taxed as a sole proprietor, and it's going to be a disregarded entity for tax purposes, so it won't affect that. But you'll have the benefit of asset protection.
And limit. So the assets would be your mower, weed whacker, that sort of stuff. So maybe not much, but you run over someone's foot, or you run over a rock, and the rock goes through the window and hits someone. They're not coming after your house. So yes, you could. It'd be very simple. If you're 13 years old and grab the mower and you're mowing your neighbor's house, you maybe are fine as a sole proprietor. But if you're going to do this on the side, I would. You spend the $100. It's gonna be worth it. Spend your first month of mowing someone's yard on getting that limited liability. What about you turn your house into a rental and you say, I'm buying the next house. This house, I'm I want to start renting out to people. What do you do there?
I'd put that house in an LLC. And we don't have time to talk about this in detail, but don't own real property through an S Corp. Don't elect that taxation treatment for real property. Don't do it. A lot of reasons for that, but that's as close to a definitive as you're going to get from an attorney. Put in an LLC, and you'll get the benefits. You're still going to get insurance because you have real estate, it has value, all those things. Just put in an LLC.
Okay. What about a family-owned business, been around for a long time, and let's say, and revenue, so established operation, and it's family, so they want to perpetuate the business and move it on to other family members. Sole proprietor is probably not going to be what you recommend. How should that business be structured?
Yeah, if it's an existing business, it's almost certainly a corporation, and it's almost certainly made the S election, so it'd be S Corp. So LLCs are 20 or so years old. They're a newer entity form. So if you have an older business, it's going to be a corporation, Texas S Corp. Usually it's not advantageous to change the form of the business. It's that the tax consequences of that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But an S Corp, one of the restrictions is it can only have one type of stock. So different, but you can't have voting and non-voting. So if you want to have equity that without voting, say the younger generation, you can do that. And if the S Corp doesn't already have voting and non-voting, it just has voting, that's a relatively easy change to make to the bylaws to have non-voting stock.
That's wonderful. We're actually, next week, Jamey's going to be on again talking about succession planning, and I've already, in the works, I've got some questions there about transitioning to the next generation and this non-voting stock. So you're going to hear more about that next week. What about a startup? And then we'll shift to Rick's question here. But what about a startup? Do you, and Josh, I'd be curious how you would weigh in here. You have no revenue yet. You just have an idea. And right now, if you're listening on YouTube, you heard about a little venture I'm starting. If you're starting something, it's usually tech or something. But a startup, where do you start?
Yeah. So a startup, what kind of business is it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be a lot of different things. But if it's some technology component, then we think someone's going to be kind of providing us some services. Someone's going to be doing some intellectual property development. No assets yet. LLC is really going to be probably the default. There's a lot of flexibility in how that's structured. You just got to have that written agreement among the owners in terms of what assets are going in, what are the obligations in terms of services or contribution of assets that is in exchange for their ownership interest. And then, again, the ownership interest can be different from the management interest. You might have one person who's just really running the business, except for kind of extraordinary business decisions. But that person might have a third, but have almost sole control because they're the ones operating the business. So a startup, you don't have any assets yet, so you want to be careful. You're not investing too much money in kind of preparing for what may come down the road, but you do want to have in mind, do some basic planning so that you know the issues to spot to really kind of lock things down as you're moving down the path of generating value in that business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And we're often some of the first to have conversations with clients along those lines because they get this entrepreneurial itch or they've got a business idea that they want to get going, and they could do the real informal route and just set up a sole proprietorship. As we said, that's kind of the default. But almost always we advise that they seriously consider doing an LLC just for the asset protection. Just to make sure that if something goes wrong, if someone is after them, suing them, creditors are breathing down their necks, there's not a spillover into many of the other financial assets that they've been working hard to build over time. Plus, as you said, the flexibility of the LLC down the road, if you choose to change the way it's being taxed to now as an S Corp, you still have that option down the road with the LLC.
As your startup grows and becomes established, successful, you can make that shift. Hey,
but that actually is why, though, LegalZoom and some of these online tools that you can just kind of go download some forms and very inexpensively, very informally just get things set up. I never recommend that to my clients. I'm always recommending that they go work with a competent attorney who specializes in this area.
Yeah.
Because you need someone who's coaching you on what your next step should be, especially as your business evolves over time. So that's a little plug for Jamey Haigh and the folks at Ledoux, Kern, and Keene, or whoever the attorney is that's your trusted advisor in this legal area.
Let's jump into a question real quick. Rick from South Bend asked a great question, and I'm very curious to hear, Jamey, what you would say. Rick says, I own a handful of small rental properties, and they're all owned by an LLC. Is that the right structure? Should it be an S Corp? You stated this earlier, but say it again.
Should not be an S Corp. Should not be an S Corp. It relates to the distribution of profits, property out of the entity. It relates to basis issues. It relates to passive income. It relates to a lot of things. But LLC is exactly right. The thing to do, or thing to think about with multiple properties, is whether you want, separate LLCs. And maybe, you want, in terms of, this goes to a little bit of a succession planning too, but, you can have, share ownership interests in various properties that way. But LLCs for sure.
Mm-hmm. What about the individual? And she's from Niles. I'm retiring later this year. My employer has asked me to stay on and work projects as a consultant. I'll be paid as an independent contractor. Do I need to formally set up a business for this? Really quick, how is that it?
You don't need to. You don't need to. If you think that the this employment tax savings might be worthwhile to S election, then you may want a single member with an S election. But that's only really if you're getting paid high enough to make it worth the time and trouble.
I totally agree. Josh, I know, has worked with several folks, me as well, where you've this is the first stage of retirement, and one thing you might want to consider is how can I help avoid taxes? And LLC with S election and also retirement plan might be able to be a good solution for you. Jamey's going to be on with us next week, again, talking about succession planning, all part of this, how legal issues impact your personal financial life. On behalf of Jamey Haigh, Josh Gregory, myself, and all of us at Corehorn Financial Group, have a great weekend. We'll see you next Saturday for Wise Money with Corehorn Financial Group.
Securities offered through Silver Oak Securities, member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through KFG Wealth Management, LLC. Doing business as Corehorn Financial Group. KFG Wealth Management, LLC and Silver Oak Securities Incorporated companies are unaffiliated.